Son sends a selfie from school trip. Dad zooms in and turns pale. Tom Parker slumped into his worn leather office chair, the weight of single fatherhood pressing down on his shoulders after another 14-hour workday. His small consulting firm demanded everything he had, but it provided the stability Luke needed since Sarah's passing 3 years ago. The house felt emptier than usual with his 13-year-old son away on his first overnight school trip to Pinewood National Park. His phone chirped, a notification from Luke. Tom's exhaustion melted away as he tapped the screen, a small smile forming at the corners of his mouth. Luke's messages were the highlight of his days, especially now. Day 1 conquered. Miss you, Dad. Read the text, accompanied by a selfie. Tom's smile widened as Luke's freckled face filled the screen. His son wore that too big green beanie Sarah had knitted him. He never went anywhere without it, and his eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement that only comes from newfound independence. Behind him spread a magnificent vista of pine-covered mountains and a crystal-clear lake, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. "That's my boy," Tom whispered, pride warming his chest. He zoomed in to get a better look at his son's expression, noticing how much Luke had begun to resemble Sarah around the eyes. As his fingers pinched the screen to zoom out again, something caught his attention at the edge of the frame. A group of hikers stood near a trail marker about 30 yards behind Luke. Tom squinted, an uneasy sensation crawling up his spine. "No," he breathed, pinching the screen again to zoom deeper into the background figures. "It can't be." But it was. Standing slightly apart from the hikers, wearing a faded red jacket and sporting a beard that couldn't disguise the face Tom knew as well as his own, Jason. His younger brother. Missing for 15 years. Presumed finished by most of the family. Tom's fingers trembled as he stared at the figure. The room seemed to tilt around him as blood drained from his face. Memories he'd buried years ago came rushing back. Jason's boyish laughter as they fished together at their grandfather's lake house, fierce arguments over the family business, the betrayal that tore them apart, Jason's tear-streaked face the last time they spoke, the police at his door with questions about Jason's whereabouts after $380,000 vanished from company accounts. "Dad, you there? Did you get my pic?" Luke's text popped up, jolting Tom back to the present. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard as he struggled to form a response that wouldn't betray his shock. How could Jason be there, of all places? Near Luke's school trip? After 15 years of nothing, not a call, not a letter, nothing but rumors of sightings in Mexico or Canada, Jason was standing less than 50 feet from Tom's son. "Got it, buddy. Looks amazing. Having fun?" Tom typed, forcing himself to sound normal, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "So much fun. Mr. Harris let us help set up the tents. I'm in with Dylan and Kai. We're having hot dogs for dinner." Tom stared at his brother's face on the screen. Jason looked older, weathered, but unmistakable. The scar above his right eyebrow from when Tom had accidentally hit him with a baseball bat when they were kids. The slight crook in his nose from a bar fight in college. Those eyes, their mother's eyes. Questions raced through Tom's mind, colliding with each other. Was this just a bizarre coincidence? Did Jason know Luke would be there? Was he watching him? Planning something? After all these years, why now? Tom's hand reached for the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he rarely opened. Inside lay a small shoebox containing the few mementos he'd kept of Jason, their last Christmas photo together, Jason's graduation tassel, the watch their father had given Jason on his 18th birthday, returned by mail 6 months after he disappeared, no return address. The last item in the box was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Local businessman's brother wanted for questioning in embezzlement case." The article was yellowed with age, but the pain it represented remained fresh. Tom had defended Jason at first, refusing to believe his brother could steal from their family's business. But the evidence had mounted: forged signatures, unauthorized transfers, Jason's sudden purchases, and hushed phone calls. When confronted, Jason had broken down, admitting partial guilt but claiming he'd been set up to take a bigger fall. He'd begged Tom for help, for money to pay a lawyer. Tom had refused. You need to face this. He'd said that night, the last time they spoke. I can't cover for you anymore. The next morning, Jason was gone. No note. Just gone, leaving the family to deal with the fallout, the shame, the financial mess, the questions from police and journalists. Their father had suffered a heart attack 6 months later, never recovering from the betrayal. And now, somehow, Jason was standing behind Luke in a national park 4 hours from home. Tom enlarged the image again, studying his brother's posture, his expression. Jason wasn't looking at the camera. His gaze seemed directed at the ground. Was he trying to avoid being seen? Or was he simply lost in thought, unaware that his estranged nephew was taking a selfie nearby? The phone rang, startling Tom so badly he nearly dropped it. Luke's school, Mrs. Barnett, the trip coordinator. Hello? Tom answered, his voice cracking. Mr. Parker? Just calling with our nightly update. All the kids are settled in for dinner, and everything's going smoothly. Luke's having a wonderful time. He's really taken to the orienteering exercises. Tom gripped the phone tighter. Mrs. Barnett, I need to ask, have you noticed any strangers hanging around the campsite? Anyone watching the kids? There was a pause. No, nothing like that. We have 3 teachers and 2 park rangers with us at all times. Is there something concerning you? Tom's mind raced. Should he tell her about Jason? But what would he say? My estranged criminal brother who disappeared 15 years ago is somehow at your campsite? He didn't even know if Jason posed any danger. For all he knew, his brother could be working as a park guide now. I thought I saw someone in the background of Luke's photo. Probably nothing. Tom forced a lightness into his voice he didn't feel. When do you head back tomorrow? After lunch, around 2 p.m. We should be back at the school by 6 at the latest. And you're certain everyone is safe? No unusual incidents? Mrs. Barnett's voice took on a reassuring tone. Absolutely certain, Mr. Parker. The kids are never out of our sight, and the park is very secure. Luke is perfectly safe. After ending the call, Tom sat in silence, staring at the photo. The shock was beginning to give way to something else, a deep, gnawing worry mixed with a spark of, what? Hope? Anger? He wasn't sure. For 15 years, he believed his brother might be finished. Now, suddenly, Jason was flesh and blood again, standing on a hiking trail like any normal person, just yards away from Luke. Tom stood abruptly, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door before stopping himself. What was he doing? He couldn't just drive 4 hours to the park in the middle of the night. What would he say to Luke? To Jason, if he even found him? He needed to think clearly. Opening his laptop, Tom pulled up the park's website, scanning the map of the campgrounds. If Mrs. Barnett was right and they were leaving after lunch tomorrow, he had time. He could drive up in the morning, arrive before they departed, and, what? Confront the brother who'd vanished from his life, leaving destruction in his wake? Protect his son from a man who might not even pose a threat? Tom didn't have answers, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't ignore this. Whatever Jason was doing there, Tom needed to find out. For Luke's sake. For his own. He returned to the photo one last time, saving it to his phone. His finger hovered over Jason's image, a jumble of emotions rising in his chest: anger, grief, confusion, and somewhere beneath it all, a flicker of the love he'd once felt for his younger brother, before everything fell apart. What are you doing there, Jason? He whispered to the screen. What do you want after all this time? In the emptiness of his house, no answer came. Tom couldn't sleep. The digital clock on his nightstand mocked him, 3:27 a.m., as he stared at the ceiling, memories washing over him like relentless waves. Before the fraud allegations, before the disappearance, Jason had been his closest ally. 7 years younger, Jason had followed Tom everywhere, wide-eyed with admiration. Tom had taught him to ride a bike, throw a curveball, talk to girls. When their mother died of cancer, 16-year-old Tom had held 10-year-old Jason through the worst nights. You're thinking about that time we stole Dad's boat, aren't you? Jason's voice echoed from the past. Summer of '98, they'd borrowed their father's prized fishing boat for a midnight cruise with friends. The propeller had caught on something, probably an old fishing net, and they'd limped back to the dock at dawn, terrified of their father's reaction. Instead of yelling, Dad had simply assessed the damage, handed them tools, and supervised the repairs. "You make a mistake, you fix it," he'd said. But Jason never really embraced that philosophy. As adults, Tom built the family construction business with steadfast reliability, while Jason charmed clients with big promises he couldn't always keep. Their father overlooked the discrepancies, blinded by Jason's charisma. "He'll grow into responsibility," he'd insisted. Tom rolled over, punching his pillow. Sleep wasn't coming tonight. The tension had begun 5 years before Jason disappeared. Small things at first: expense reports that didn't add up, client payments that arrived late, Jason's inexplicable new car and luxury apartment despite his modest salary. Tom had confronted him multiple times, only to be met with elaborate explanations that almost made sense. "You've always been jealous that Dad likes me better," Jason had shouted during one particularly heated argument, words that cut Tom deeper than his brother could know. Their father had refused to see the problems, accusing Tom of being too rigid, too suspicious. "Your brother needs support, not scrutiny," he'd admonished. Then came the Westlake Resort project, their biggest contract ever. Jason handled client relations and finances while Tom managed construction. 3 months in, Tom discovered funds diverted through false invoices to shell companies, all linked to Jason. The final confrontation played in Tom's mind like a scene from a movie he'd watched too many times. Their father's office, wood-paneled and smelling of pipe tobacco. Rain battering the windows. Jason, tear-streaked and desperate, had admitted to borrowing money, not the full amount, he'd insisted, just enough to cover some debts. He'd promised to return it. "I got mixed up with some people. Gambling debts. They were threatening me, Tom. I was going to pay it back before anyone noticed." Tom had wanted to believe him. But the forensic accountant's report told a different story: systematic theft over 3 years, nearly $400,000. "Help me, Tom. I need 50 grand for a lawyer who can make this go away. I'll pay you back, I swear." Jason's eyes, their mother's eyes, had been wild with desperation. "You need to confess. Return what you can. Face the consequences." Tom had stood firm, even as his heart broke. "That's the only way forward. I can't enable this anymore. You've always been so perfect, haven't you?" Jason had spat. "St. Thomas. Never a mistake. Never a moment of weakness. This isn't weakness, Jason. It's theft. It's betrayal. If you won't help me, we're done. Forever." Jason's final words before he'd stormed out into the rain. The next morning, Jason was gone. His apartment cleared out, phone disconnected. The police investigation revealed multiple identities, credit cards and different names. It seemed Jason had been preparing his escape for months. Their father never recovered from the dual blow of betrayal and loss. The heart attack came 6 months later. At the funeral, Tom had scanned the mourners, half expecting, half hoping to see Jason lurking at the edges. But his brother truly had vanished. Years passed. Tom rebuilt the business, met Sarah, had Luke. Life moved forward. He would go months without thinking about Jason, then something, a man with a similar walk, a particular song on the radio, would trigger the memories again. Sarah had been the only one who understood the complexity of his grief. "It's okay to miss who he was, while being angry at what he did," she told him. After Sarah died, Tom sometimes caught himself thinking Jason should know about her passing. But how do you send news to a ghost? Now, sprawled sleepless across his bed, Tom reached for his phone again. The photo of Luke glowed in the darkness. Behind him stood Jason, not a ghost, not a memory, but flesh and blood. Older, bearded, but unmistakably the brother who'd vanished 15 years ago. Questions churned in Tom's mind as dawn approached. Was Jason's presence near Luke mere coincidence? Or something more deliberate? What did Jason want after all this time? Money? Forgiveness? Something else entirely? Tom rose as first light filtered through the blinds. Whatever Jason's reasons, one thing was clear: Tom wouldn't let his son become entangled in his brother's web. He'd protected Luke from so much already. He would protect him from this too. But beneath the protective instinct lay something else, a fragile, unwelcome spark of hope that perhaps, after all this time, there might finally be answers. Closure. Perhaps even redemption. By 6 a.m., Tom had showered, packed an overnight bag, and made his decision. He would drive to Pinewood National Park. Not with violence or confrontation in mind, but with determination. It was time to face the past. Dawn broke over the suburbs as Tom loaded his overnight bag into the trunk of his sedan. The morning air carried a crisp autumn chill that matched the cold determination settling in his chest. He'd called his assistant at the consulting firm to reschedule the day's meetings. A family emergency, he'd explained. Not entirely a lie. Before pulling out of the driveway, Tom texted Luke a casual good morning message, asking about day 2 of the trip, careful not to hint at his intentions. The response came almost immediately. "Morning, Dad! About to go on a nature hike. Mr. Harris says there's a waterfall. Miss you!" Tom smiled despite himself. Attached was another photo, Luke and his friends huddled around a campfire, toasting marshmallows. No sign of Jason in this one. Tom scanned the background carefully, zooming in on each section before finally exhaling. His brother wasn't there. As the suburbs gave way to countryside, Tom's mind cleared enough to form a plan. Rushing in blindly would only create chaos. If Jason meant harm, alerting him would be dangerous. If he was just passing through, an astronomical coincidence. Making a scene would disrupt Luke's trip unnecessarily. Tom dialed Mrs. Barnett's number, putting it on speaker as he navigated the highway. "Mr. Parker? Everything all right?" Her voice carried a note of concern. "Just checking in." Tom kept his tone casual. "Luke mentioned meeting some local guides yesterday. Anyone unusual around the campsite?" A pause. "Well, the Ranger Service provides official guides, but there are always hikers passing through." "Did Luke mention someone specific?" "No, nothing specific," Tom replied. "I just want to make sure the kids are supervised at all times." "Absolutely. We have strict protocols. The rangers said this section of the park is quite popular though. The waterfall trail attracts lots of day hikers." Tom processed this information. Jason could easily blend in as a regular visitor. "One more thing," Tom added casually. "I'm actually not far from the park. Had a meeting cancel in that direction. Would it be alright if I stopped by to see the campsite before you head back? Maybe bring some extra snacks for the bus ride home? That's unusually dedicated, even for you." Mrs. Barnett chuckled. "But of course. We'll be at Bluebell Campground until noon, then hiking back to the visitor center. You're welcome to join us for lunch around 1 p.m. before we board the buses." Tom thanked her and ended the call, gripping the steering wheel tighter. He'd arrive around 11, enough time to scout the area before approaching Luke. Though he longed to warn his son, telling a 13-year-old that his supposedly finished criminal uncle was potentially stalking him seemed guaranteed to cause panic. For the next 3 hours, Tom drove in silence, refusing the radio's distraction. The weight of 15 years of unanswered questions pressed on him. Why had Jason never reached out? Even after their father's death? After Sarah's? Had he started a new life completely? And most pressingly, why surface now near Luke? The GPS announced his arrival at Pinewood National Park. Tom pulled into the visitor center parking lot, noting the school buses that would later transport Luke and his classmates back to the city. He checked his watch, 10:47 a.m. At the information desk, a young ranger with Tyler on his name tag greeted him cheerfully. "Bluebell Campground?" Tyler confirmed, pointing to a trail map. "It's about a 30-minute walk that way. The school group's finishing their nature program there now." "Actually," Tom hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I'm looking for someone who might be working here. My brother, we've lost touch, But I think he might be a guide or worker at the park. What's his name? Tyler asked. Tom realized he had no idea what name Jason might be using now. Jason Parker. About my height, dark beard, scar above his right eyebrow? Tyler shook his head. Doesn't sound like any of our staff. Could be a volunteer or seasonal though. The volunteer coordinator might know, she's out until tomorrow. Tom thanked him and headed for the trail, mind racing. Not officially employed here then. Just passing through? Or something else? The trail wound through towering pines, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Under different circumstances, Tom might have appreciated the beauty. Now, each shadow seemed to conceal threats, each snapping twig a warning. He slowed as he approached the campground clearing, scanning the area methodically. Several adults supervised groups of middle schoolers packing tents. Tom spotted Luke helping dismantle a blue tent, laughing with his friends. The sight of his son, safe, happy, oblivious, loosened the knot in his chest slightly. No sign of Jason. Tom systematically surveyed the perimeter, eyes catching on each bearded man before dismissing them. His brother wasn't among the visible adults. Fighting the urge to rush to Luke, Tom instead approached a female ranger demonstrating proper backpack packing. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I'm Tom Parker, Luke's father. Mrs. Barnett knows I'm coming." The ranger nodded. "She mentioned you might stop by. Your son's having a great time. I've been wondering." Tom kept his voice low, casual. "Have you noticed anyone unusual hanging around? Maybe watching the group? A man with a beard keeps to himself?" The ranger's expression shifted subtly. "You mean the guy who's been sketching by the lake? Keeps his distance, but we've had our eye on him. Park policy. Anyone lingering near school groups gets monitored. He hasn't approached the children though." Tom's pulse quickened. "Where exactly?" "Follow the trail past those trees." She pointed. "There's a bench overlooking the lake. He was there earlier." Tom thanked her and turned away, heart hammering. After 15 years of questions, answers lay just beyond those trees. Not with violence, not with panic, but with steady purpose, Tom headed toward the lake, and toward the brother who had become a stranger. The trail narrowed as it approached the lake, winding through a copse of old-growth pines. Tom slowed his pace, each step deliberate, his mind racing faster than his heartbeat. 15 years of questions were about to meet their answers. The forest opened to a small clearing where a wooden bench faced the water, and there, unmistakable even from behind, sat Jason. His brother's shoulders were hunched forward, his attention focused on a small sketch pad balanced on his knee. A pencil moved in quick, practiced strokes across the page. He wore the same faded red jacket from Luke's photo, now visible as a weather-beaten outdoor coat rather than the designer clothes he'd once favored. His dark hair, longer than Tom remembered, was streaked with premature gray. Tom stopped, suddenly uncertain. The last time they'd spoken had ended in shouts and slammed doors. What would he even say now? Every rehearsed confrontation dissolved as the reality of his brother, flesh and blood, not memory, sat 20 feet away. A twig snapped under Tom's boot. Jason's head jerked up, his body tensing. He turned slowly, and when their eyes met, 15 years collapsed into nothing. Recognition, shock, and something like fear flashed across Jason's face. He stood abruptly, his sketchpad tumbling to the ground, pencil rolling away toward the water's edge. For a moment, Tom thought he might run, disappear into the woods and become a ghost again. Instead, Jason remained frozen, like a deer caught in headlights. "Tom," he finally managed, his voice rougher than Tom remembered. "I should have known you'd come." "What are you doing here, Jason?" Tom kept his voice low, controlled, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Jason bent slowly to retrieve his fallen sketchpad, a delaying tactic. When he straightened, his expression had composed itself into something more guarded. "Nothing sinister, if that's what you're thinking. You're lurking around my son's school trip after disappearing for 15 years. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Tom took a step closer, noticing how his brother instinctively stepped back. "I wasn't lurking," Jason replied, a defensiveness creeping into his tone. I didn't even know he'd be here until I saw the school buses yesterday. A pause, then quieter. He looks like you. How would you know what Luke looks like at all? Tom's question came out sharper than intended. Jason's gaze dropped to the sketchpad in his hands. He turned it around, revealing a half-finished sketch of the lake. In the corner, almost as an afterthought, was a small but detailed drawing of Luke laughing with his friends. Social media, Jason admitted. I've kept tabs from a distance. Your construction firm's website has family photos. Luke's school posts event pictures. He swallowed visibly. I know about Sarah. I'm sorry, Tom. She seemed wonderful. The mention of Sarah's name from Jason's lips sent a surge of anger through Tom. You don't get to be sorry. You weren't there. I know. Jason's shoulders slumped. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. Then what are you asking for? Tom demanded. Why are you here? Jason gestured vaguely toward the lake. I live about 60 miles north. Work as a freelance illustrator, nature guides, educational materials. I come here to sketch sometimes. He hesitated. When I saw the school group yesterday, I recognized Luke immediately. Your son right here. I wanted to see him. Just once. See him, Tom repeated skeptically. From a distance. Yes, Jason insisted, meeting his brother's gaze directly for the first time. Just see him. I wasn't going to approach him, talk to him, nothing like that. I swear, Tom. I just wanted to know if... He faltered. If you were happy? If he was happy? The sincerity in Jason's voice gave Tom pause. He studied his brother's face, thinner than he remembered, lined around the eyes, beard peppered with gray despite him being only 40. Jason looked worn down, like someone who'd been running for a very long time. 15 years, Jason, Tom said finally. 15 years without a word. Dad died thinking you might be finished too. Pain flashed across Jason's features. I heard. Too late to attend the funeral. He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Tom's chest ache with unwelcome recognition. I made a mess of everything, Tom. I know that. But I'm not here to drag you into anything. I'm not here to disrupt your life. Then why now? Why ever? Tom pressed, the questions that had haunted him for years finally finding voice. You could have called. Written. Something. Jason turned toward the lake, his profile sharper than Tom remembered. Shame, he said simply. At first, I was just running. Then, the longer I stayed away, the harder it became to imagine coming back. What would I even say? Sorry I stole from the family and disappeared for years? He shook his head. After a while, it seemed kinder to stay a ghost. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle lapping of water against the shore and distant voices of schoolchildren packing up camp. Are you clean now? Tom finally asked. The gambling? The lies? Jason nodded slowly. 10 years sober from the tables. Live simply. Pay taxes under my legal name, though I go by Jason Reed professionally. He smiled thinly. Ironic that I make an honest living drawing pictures. Dad always said my art was a waste of time. Despite himself, Tom felt the corner of his mouth twitch upward. Their father had indeed been dismissive of Jason's artistic talents, pushing him instead toward the practical, business world where he'd floundered and eventually fallen. Luke doesn't know about you, Tom said. I never told him he had an uncle who disappeared. That's probably for the best, Jason replied quietly. I'm not asking to be part of his life, Tom. Or yours. His voice caught. I just wanted to see with my own eyes that you were okay. That my mistakes didn't ruin everything for you. Tom studied his brother, searching for deception, for the charming manipulator who'd once talked his way out of every consequence. Instead, he saw only exhaustion and regret, and perhaps, beneath it all, a flicker of the brother he'd once known. I should go, Jason said, glancing toward the campground. Your son will be looking for you. As Jason turned to leave, Tom surprised himself by saying, "He has your laugh. Look. When something really gets him going, he laughs just like he used to." Jason froze, his back to Tom, shoulders tightening. When he turned, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered, "for telling me that." Tom gestured toward the bench. "Sit. We should talk." Jason hesitated, then lowered himself onto one end of the weathered wooden seat. Tom took the other end, maintaining a careful distance between them. For a moment neither spoke, the silence filled only by birdsong and distant laughter from the campsite. "I expected you to punch me," Jason finally said, a shadow of his old wry humor surfacing briefly. "I considered it," Tom admitted. The urge had certainly been there when he first spotted Jason, a visceral desire to physically expel 15 years of anger and grief. But what would that solve? The lake stretched before them, sunlight dancing across its surface. 2 ducks cut smooth paths through the water, creating expanding ripples that eventually disappeared against the shore. "I was angry for so long," Tom continued, voice low but steady. "Not just about the money. About you running. About you not being there when Dad died. When Sarah got sick." His hands tightened into fists, then slowly relaxed. "About Luke growing up without knowing his uncle." Jason winced. "I deserve that. All of it." He turned the sketchbook over in his hands repeatedly, a nervous habit. "I've imagined this conversation 1,000 times. Had all these explanations prepared. Now they all sound like excuses." "Try anyway," Tom said. "I've waited 15 years for answers. I deserve that much." Jason nodded slowly. "After I left that night, I initially just planned to lay low until I could figure something out. I was staying at this motel outside Tremont." He paused. "I saw the news report. Local businessman's brother wanted for questioning. My photo everywhere." "You panicked," Tom stated, not a question. "I panicked," Jason confirmed. "Had some cash saved, fake ID from my gambling days. I headed west. Kept moving for years, taking odd jobs, always looking over my shoulder. You could have called. Asked for help," Tom said, the old frustration rising again. Jason laughed bitterly. "After what I did? After you made it clear you wouldn't help?" "I wouldn't help you run from the consequences," Tom corrected sharply. "I would have helped you face them." The distinction hung between them, significant and painful. "You were always the better man, Tom," Jason said quietly. "The responsible one. The one who did things right." "That's not fair," Tom replied. "This perfect image you created, it's a lie you told yourself to justify running away. I'm not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes. Not like mine." "No," Tom agreed. "Not like yours. But that's the difference, Jason. I faced my mistakes. I fixed what I could. I lived with what I couldn't." Jason nodded, accepting the rebuke. "When did the investigation end?" 3 years after you left. The statute of limitations hasn't expired for all of it, but the active investigation closed. Dad had already repaid most of the money to save the company's reputation." "Dad paid it back?" Jason looked stricken. "What did you think would happen?" Tom asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "That the money would just magically reappear? That the clients wouldn't notice?" Jason stared at the ground. "I was going to make it right someday. Send the money back anonymously when I could." "And did you? Ever try to make it right?" Jason reached into his pocket and withdrew a worn envelope. "I've been sending money to Dad's old church for years. Anonymous donations. It wasn't enough, but it was something." He offered the envelope to Tom. "This is the rest. Everything I've saved. It still doesn't cover all of it, but..." Tom made no move to take it. "Keep it. Dad's gone. The debts are settled. Please," Jason insisted, voice cracking. "I need you to take it. I can't move forward if..." He swallowed hard. "I can't bear carrying this anymore." After a long moment, Tom took the envelope, tucking it into his jacket without looking inside. "This doesn't fix everything, Jason." "I know." They sat in silence again, the weight of unspoken words and lost years pressing down on them. "What about you?" Tom finally asked. "Beyond the sketching. Are you happy?" A complicated expression crossed Jason's face. "I'm at peace, mostly. Live simply. Have a small cabin. Few friends who know nothing about my past." He paused. "No family. Never married." The admission carried the weight of a life lived in isolation, a self-imposed exile that went beyond mere physical distance. "And you?" Jason asked cautiously. "After Sarah, have you?" Tom shook his head. "Luke keeps me busy. The business too. You always did put everyone else first," Jason observed softly. Tom felt an unexpected surge of emotion at the simple statement, the acknowledgement from someone who had known him before he was a husband, before he was a father. Someone who remembered him as just Tom. "What do you want from me now, Jason?" Tom asked directly. "Now that we've found each other again. What happens next?" Jason looked surprised by the question. "I don't expect anything, Tom. I wasn't planning on you finding me at all." He gestured vaguely toward the campsite. "I'll go back to my life. You go back to yours. I won't interfere unless..." He hesitated. "Unless you want me to. And even then, only on your terms. And if I say I never want to see you again?" Pain flashed across Jason's face, but he nodded. "Then that's what happens. I'll respect that." Tom studied his brother, the lines around his eyes, the premature gray in his beard, the weathered hands that spoke of manual labor rather than the soft office work he'd once done. This was not the Jason who had fled in the night 15 years ago. This was someone else, someone who had been shaped by regret and solitude into a different man. "I don't know what I want yet," Tom admitted honestly. "This is a lot to process." "I understand," Jason said, rising from the bench. "Take all the time you need. Years if necessary." He pulled a small card from his pocket and placed it on the bench between them. "My contact information. If you ever want to reach out. For anything." Tom looked at the card but didn't take it immediately. "Why did you really come here, Jason?" "The truth." Jason's gaze returned to the lake, his voice barely audible above the breeze. "I guess I was hoping for a glimpse of what might have been. A life where I hadn't ruined everything." He smiled sadly. "A chance to see family, even if they couldn't see me." The raw honesty in that statement struck Tom more powerfully than any elaborate explanation could have. He reached for the card, tucking it into his wallet. "Luke will be looking for me," Tom said, standing. "I should go." Jason nodded, understanding. "Goodbye, Tom." As Tom turned to leave, he paused. "This doesn't mean forgiveness." "Not yet." "I know," Jason replied softly. "But it's more than I deserve." Tom found Luke helping the other students load backpacks onto a pile near the buses. His son's face lit up when he spotted him, surprise and joy mingling in his expression. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Luke dropped the backpack he was holding and rushed over, crashing into Tom with the full-bodied hug of a child not yet too cool for public displays of affection. Tom wrapped his arms around his son, holding him tighter and longer than usual. The solid reality of Luke in his arms, safe, untouched by the complicated history that had just resurfaced, grounded him in the present moment. "Thought I'd surprise you," Tom said, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "Had a meeting cancel nearby. Mrs. Barnett said I could join for lunch before you head back." Luke pulled away, eyes bright with excitement. "That's awesome. Did you see the lake? We learned how to use compasses yesterday and found this cool hidden trail. I'm getting really good at identifying different trees too." Tom nodded, grateful for his son's enthusiasm that required little response from him, while his mind still processed the encounter with Jason. He let Luke lead him toward the picnic area where the other students were gathering, his hand resting on his son's shoulder, reluctant to break the physical connection. As they crossed the clearing, Tom couldn't help glancing back toward the lake path. Jason stood at the forest's edge, a solitary figure half hidden by trees. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, too far to see expressions clearly, but close enough that Tom could sense his brother's stillness, his hesitation. Then Jason raised his hand in a small, tentative gesture, not quite a wave, more an acknowledgement. Tom felt Luke tugging at his sleeve, pulling his attention back. "Dad? You okay?" "Yeah, buddy. Just taking in the view." Tom smiled down at his son, ruffling his hair. "It's beautiful out here." They joined the other students and chaperones for lunch. Tom made small talk with the teachers, answered questions about his surprise appearance with practiced ease, but part of him remained acutely aware of the woods around them. Would Jason approach? Make some dramatic reveal? But as the meal progressed, there was no sign of his brother. Tom excused himself briefly, telling Luke he needed to make a work call. Instead, he walked to a quiet spot at the edge of the clearing, just out of sight of the picnic tables. He wasn't sure what compelled him, closure, perhaps, or simply the need to confirm this hadn't all been some strange hallucination. The lake path remained empty. Jason had gone. Whether respecting Tom's boundaries or retreating back into anonymity, his brother had chosen not to linger. Tom felt a complicated wave of emotions, relief mixed with an unexpected pang of loss. For 15 years, the possibility of Jason's return had been a hypothetical, a what-if scenario he'd occasionally entertained but never truly prepared for. Now, having seen his brother, spoken with him, the reality left him unmoored. The card in his wallet seemed to burn against his leg. A lifeline to a past he tried to bury, a possible bridge to a future he'd never considered. "Mr. Parker?" Mrs. Barnett's voice startled him from his thoughts. "We're loading the buses in 15 minutes. Tom nodded, composing himself. "I'll be right there." When he returned to the group, Luke was deep in conversation with his friends, animated and carefree. Tom watched him, seeing flashes of Sarah in his expressions, echoes of his own father in the set of his jaw. And yes, that laugh when one of his friends said something particularly funny. That was unmistakably Jason's laugh, bubbling up from a place of pure joy. The sound hit Tom like a physical force. Family wasn't just about blood or shared history. It was these unconscious inheritances, these traits that surfaced across generations, connecting them whether they acknowledged the connections or not. As the students began boarding the buses, Tom helped Luke with his backpack. "I'll follow behind you guys in my car," he explained. "See you back at school." Luke nodded, then hesitated. "Hey, Dad? Is everything really okay? You seem, I don't know, different." Tom looked at his son, perceptive, intuitive Luke, and considered what to say. The full truth seemed too heavy a burden to place on 13-year-old shoulders. Yet complete evasion felt dishonest. "I ran into someone from my past today," Tom said carefully. "Someone I hadn't seen in a very long time. It brought up a lot of memories." "Good memories or bad ones?" Luke asked. "Both," Tom admitted. "Life's complicated that way sometimes." Luke processed this with unexpected maturity. "Like how I miss Mom, but thinking about her makes me happy too." Tom swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. "Exactly like that, buddy." The final call for boarding interrupted them. Luke gave his father another quick hug before racing to join his friends. Tom watched him go, marveling at the resilience of children, their ability to navigate emotional complexities without drowning in them as adults so often did. Walking back to his car, Tom took one last look at the lake, sunlight glinting off its surface, the bench now empty, no sign of the encounter that had shaken 15 years of certainty. For so long, he'd carried the weight of Jason's betrayal and disappearance, allowing it to calcify into a hardened shell around certain parts of his heart. He slid into the driver's seat and pulled out the card Jason had given him. Simple, minimalist design. Jason Reed, Nature and Wildlife Illustrations, with a phone number and email address. A legitimate business, a legal name, a life rebuilt from the wreckage of old mistakes. Tom placed the card back in his wallet. He wasn't ready to reach out, not yet. But for the first time in 15 years, the possibility existed. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps understanding. Not reconciliation, but an acknowledgement that their shared history didn't need to end with that rain-soaked argument from another lifetime. As he started the engine and prepared to follow the school buses back to the city, Tom felt something shift inside him, not the dramatic closure of a door or the triumphant opening of a new one, but the gentle easing of a lock that had been jammed for far too long. He would tell Luke someday, about the uncle he'd never known, about mistakes and consequences, about the complexity of family ties that bend but don't always break. Not today, not tomorrow, but when the time was right. For now, it was enough to drive home with his son, to know that while some wounds would always leave scars, they had finally, quietly, begun to heal.